I never fucked anybody over in my life. Didn't have it coming. You got that? All I have in this world is my balls and my word. And I don't break them for no one. You understand?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I work for Kaiser Soze.
Tu me déçois énormément.
I work for Kaiser Soze.
Je suis colère, les enfants, je suis colère.
So if you didn't already gather by the title of the show, I'm going to talk about Terminator today. Talk about lightning in a bottle, first of all. James Cameron's 1984 seminal hit. Is that the right word? Seminal? Oh, whatever. Sentinel hit. Get it? Which really, to me, is... it's a horror movie. It's really the only one that is technically a horror movie, I guess you could say. The rest are more sci-fi action. This is kind of like sci-fi horror, I guess, but truly, you really should categorize it as a horror movie. So that's why I kind of wanted to do it for the 1st of October for Halloween, because it's kind of scary. So we're going to talk about that one today. This is Terminator 1 and 2, really. One of the most, if not the most, important movies of our childhood. More so Terminator 2, like it was just like Predator and Predator 2. Like I knew about more about Predator than Predator 2, even though they were around when we were doing this, watching these movies. We knew more about Terminator 2 than actually Terminator, and it was kind of like the same story I told during Predator, where you just kind of one day find out, oh, there is a reason why it's called Terminator 2, because there's a number 1. And then you find that one and you're like, oh, this is a completely different movie. And what's interesting about Terminator as opposed to the other ones is, because if you listen to Kyle Reese talk, when he comes back from the future, back from the future, are these films related? He says that Skynet was destroyed. So it was the end of the war. Like, sending the Terminator back was a last-ditch effort to win the war by basically stopping its main hero. Duh, if you haven't seen it, spoilers, but it's 35 years old or so, you should have been on that shit. And this one's kind of famous, if you didn't already know, for James Cameron wanting O.J. Simpson to play the Terminator, and he felt that Simpson wasn't believable as a murderer. So, and for me, I think that most people would echo this thought, but I prefer Terminator 2. It's a much more solid movie, but I think what I like about Terminator 1 more is that you actually get to see the endoskeleton. That was my favorite part. And I guess now that I'm thinking about it, this movie can really help me trace my steps back to when I really wanted to be a writer, I guess. Because I did this after school program when I was in elementary school where you just kind of stayed after and did, creative stuff or whatever. And I actually wrote 2 short stories called The Metal Skeleton. I know it's not very, it's kind of obvious what it is, but whatever. I'm 5 and 6 years old, 8, 9, whatever. So that's one of the reasons why this film series is so important to us, I guess. And if you think about it, Terminator only had a budget of $6 million, which is probably a lot for 1984. But if you think about it, just 7 years later, then he's asking for $100 million for Terminator 2. Like, that was back when you did movies with that kind of budget, you had something to prove, I guess. Whereas Terminator 2, they wanted to showcase all those special effects, just like what Jurassic Park did, and that was awe-inspiring, I guess, for lack of a better term, because you go from this basically an indie movie to this huge blockbuster. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. What's even more scary, could you imagine if that didn't work out, if Terminator 2 sucked and they spent all that money, and oh my goodness, it was like $1 billion back in 91. And I wanted to also do this episode because they just did a re-release of Terminator 2 in 3D, which I went and saw. The 3D was not necessary, but it was cool to see it on the big screen again. I like going back, being able to go back and see these older movies on the big screen here. So we're watching this, and I'm thinking, like, I thought a couple different things that never came to me before, but Terminator 2 is basically just a remake of Terminator 1 masquerading as a sequel. It doesn't pretend to be that by any means, but if you research the Terminator and know your history on Terminator 2, then what Cameron wanted to do in the first one was actually have a T-1000. But obviously you couldn't do that in 94 with the technology available. So if you pay attention to the story structure and the main points of it, they mirror what he wanted to do in the Terminator. You know, the Skynet sends a Terminator back. The Resistance sends their fighter back. And they duke it out. And you notice that, you know, in the Terminator, Kyle Reese had said that the war was won. It was over. But sending them back to Terminator was their last-ditch effort. But they don't make no mention of that in this one. And what's funny about Terminator versus all the rest of them is they're not worried about ending the war. They're just worried about keeping John Connor alive so he can fight the war. It's only Terminator 2 on where they tried to stop the war altogether. Which in Terminator 2 is cool because it's a new story element. It gets tiresome in the next installments, but Terminator 2 pulls it off obviously a lot better than the other ones do. And if you stop thinking after Terminator 2, it really seals that up nicely. And minus the fact that if Skynet didn't send the Terminator back, it would also not create itself, but it wouldn't create the war or whatever. And famously or not, Terminator 2 has actually several different versions of it, and I didn't realize that the love people had for actually the special edition of it, which I didn't see until 2003, 2004 when Terminator 3 came out, because they released all that stuff. I don't like it as much. I think it kind of ruins the magic of Terminator 2, really. It kind of shows off this I call him the evil T-1000. I don't know where that came from. Maybe the toys around that time. I don't know, whatever. So it kind of ruins, like, what it shows, at least to me, is that the T-1000, even though Arnold Schwarzenegger says he's an advanced prototype, it really shows off his prototypiness. It's not a word, but it is now. Which is cool in its own right, but it drags down the movie. And it really only shows it, you know, towards the end, when Arnold Schwarzenegger gives his famous line, "Hasta la vista, baby," blows him away. It only really starts to pick up right there. You know, he grabs that pole and his hand turns to the black and yellow safety stripe line. And there's bits and pieces sprinkled out throughout the theatrical cut of it that kind of hint to that stuff, but really I didn't really like it. And even like the Ultra Special Edition, which on the Blu-ray it came out on, I believe, which you had to type in a code to watch it, which was the original Judgment Day, August 29th, 1997, with the Back to the Future ending on it. And if you haven't seen this, you really need to. It is literally like that fast forwards to the future, because now that they have prevented Skynet from ever starting, I guess, it shows John and Sarah all grown, and John has a kid now, and it literally looks like they lifted it from Back to the Future. It's got that weird 80s future fashion going on and stuff like that. It's odd. And one of the things that all of these special editions bother me is that fucking smile that Arnold Schwarzenegger does as Terminator 2. As Terminator 2, like he's a sequel himself. God, I'm terrible. And I said in King Kong, the King Kong episode, that I would love to travel back in time to sit with people in a movie theater and watch King Kong with them as it's happening. I would also like to go back in time, erase my memory of Terminator 2, but not Terminator 1, and sit in a movie theater not knowing that Arnold Schwarzenegger is a good guy. That would blow my fucking mind. Because it's built into our collective consciousness now that he is a good guy in this, but you don't really know that until that mall hallway scene, because it's built, they're both pointing their gun, they're pointing them at each other, but John's in the middle, and your knowledge of Terminator 1 tells you that Arnold Schwarzenegger is there to blow him away, and the cop is there to do good. So I think that would be cool to experience with people and have that oh shit moment, you know what I mean? But here's one thing about the re-release of Terminator 2. So James Cameron's not as bad as George Lucas, but you know, when he re-released Titanic, he went back and made the skyline more accurate, which is weird. Like only him and Neil deGrasse Tyson are going to know that. But in Terminator 2, they removed a few things, which I'm watching it, and it's weird because I have this weird dictionary in my head of whenever there's a cock shot in a movie. And I know that when Robert Patrick kills the cop and kneels down, you can see his little ball bag there. And I'm watching it on 3D, I'm like, hey, there's no ball bag there anymore. What's going on? Well, they removed that, which is sad. And then when Arnold jumps the motorcycle off of there, you could always tell that it was the stunt actor's face. It's not completely noticeable. It's not like a Michael Myers with blonde hair type deal, but you know what's going on. So they changed that. They digitally put Arnold's face on there. And then on the same scene, when the T-1000 crashes the truck and the windshield falls off, but then it's on later, they made it so that it doesn't fall off anymore. And while I'm on that subject, I can never watch Terminator 1 the same way again, because once they came out and they redid the audio for the DVD release, like, the pistol sounds are different to me than what I remember, and it's so ingrained into me. Even though I've probably watched it more now than when I was little, it's always odd hearing that different pistol noise going off. But anyway, that's all for my griping on that. And we had to wait 12 long years for a new Terminator after that, Terminator 3, which was right before Arnold went off to be the governor of California. I hadn't seen him in a while, probably. Like, what was his last movie before that? Eraser or something, which he's still kind of young, even though he's really not young. You know, he was 37 when he did Terminator 1. I guess he was in a couple of movies. Collateral Damage is weird. End of Days. But that's kind of like, you know, it's winding down, you know. T2, Battle Across Time was in between there. Which I wish they had put that. I know it's kind of like an interactive thing, but I wish they would somehow incorporate that to be able to watch that in your home. That would be neat. But anyway, Terminator 3, which people love to bash Terminator 4, but then give Terminator 3 all the love. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. Terminator 4 is a way better movie than Terminator 3. It just is. Jonathan Mostow can direct the shit out of an action scene, because that one when they're driving with that fucking construction truck crane and the shit's blowing up, that is pulse pounding right there. But the physics in that movie has always bothered me. The fucking weird comedy. I'll watch it. It's not hard for me to watch, but it is definitely on the bottom of the list of when you compare all of these movies together. At least for me. It was cool to give you that fucking gut punch at the end. Again, spoiler alerts if you haven't seen this. You're on this ride through the whole thing, like, oh, are you seriously, like, fucking Skynet again, and they're trying to stop it? But going back into it, and you're listening to Arnold try to stop them, because he knows that it's unstoppable. It's inevitable. That's his quote from the line. Judgment Day is inevitable. So, you know, sitting in the theater, I do kind of remember that. I went with my dad, and thinking, oh, how are they going to stop it now? And then oh, you can't. And then the bombs drop. It ends on a fucking sour note. And you're like, all right, it kind of redeems itself for the fucking talk to the hand bullshit and the putting the star sunglasses on at the strip club bullshit. Which, this movie takes place 10 years later. And what the mistake they really made was putting Arnold in leather again. Like, 91, that works for that time frame. That's the biker persona. But now, like, and Terminator Genisys kind of updated that a little bit. Put him in more modern clothes. You know, he doesn't need to go get biker clothes every time. And I will say, even though it's a cheesy line, when he crashes the helicopter into the mountain at the end and he jumps out and he says, "I'm back," it's kind of like, it's like a little endearing moment. You're like, oh, he said he's back. He's finally back. He came back. Not for long because he blows himself up. But yeah, they took that movie in a little bit of a wrong direction in terms of tone. Terminator Salvation is a big, nice, almost an apology for that movie, I guess. And what's cool about the Terminators, until 5, obviously, they still follow, you know, this same timeline. You know, they have Claire Danes' character in it, who's now played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and Christian Bale plays John Connor instead of Nick Stoll. But I dig Terminator 4 a lot. I think it's probably my number 3 favorite behind the first 2. The action in it is great, and if you watch it with a great sound system, it'll rattle the teeth out of your head. And it has too many homages, don't get me wrong, but it has some cool, nice homages to the original. You finally get to see the T-600s in action, even though not so much with their rubber skin, but you get to see them. And when John captures the motorcycle Terminator, the Moto Terminators, bicycle Terminators, whatever, it's the same Guns N' Roses song, which I'll never not hear that song and think of Terminator 2. And it just won't happen for me. He fights the T-800 in its skeletal form again, which is cool because remember that's what I said I liked about the first Terminator, was you get to actually see the full endoskeleton, and you see how he gets his scar on his face. That's fucking cool. I really wish, and it took it in a new direction. You know, it's not the same time travel shit. It's not. They were still trying to stop Skynet, but it was the beginning of that final battle, and there's still that fucking little. It's not the same thing that you think, because now we're in a different timeline. Skynet has that weird USB device that shows them where the submarine is and blows them shit. Spoiler. I wish they had continued that storyline. I really do. It was a missed opportunity to see something new in the Terminator world, because it sets up this sort of mystery at the very beginning, because John sees the specs for the T-800 and he says, this is different than what I remember. So there's a lot of cool things that it set up that we didn't quite get to see. But with Terminator Genisys, it's not bad either. Like, it's probably underneath Terminator 3 in terms of ranking, but I like what they did with it to an extent. I like how you get to see that final battle at the beginning, where they send Kyle back. I wish they had picked someone better than Mr. Courtney, but it is what it is. They get the laser guns again, you know. It's a nice homage to the original Terminator and Terminator 2, where they have those weird gray outfits, and then you get to see the time machine in action. And then once they get to 1984, like, shit's flipped on its head. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger shows up, which was a great way to justify his age. You know, in Terminator 3, he was supposed to be the same thing, which clearly he's not. He's a lot older. He looks older. But this one says, you know, he's been here, they aged. This is what he's going to look like now. I thought that was cool. Him fighting himself was cool. The introduction of the T-1000 early, which is interesting. Again, this one sets up a lot of mysteries to follow through with. It's unfortunate that, again, we don't get to see this, because there are some cool concepts there, like who sent Gramps back, why so early, why is the T-1000 there so early, because it's playing off this knowledge that the audience has that you don't, or excuse me, that the characters don't. So it automatically, there's a built-in mystery there to kind of capture your attention. Unfortunately, it didn't do well, and now there's talk of rebooting it again. The only thing I don't like, because it's a great scene at the end when Arnold is fighting the T-5000 of John, and he tells Kyle to protect his Sarah, because they set up this whole thing, like Kyle's beating it into her head that the machine doesn't have feelings, doesn't have feelings, doesn't have feelings. It's a machine. But then you get these little hints that maybe he does. He saves the drawings from when she's little, and then that scene at the very end, he says, you know, protect my Sarah, which kind of puts a little lump in my throat. I don't know about you. But then he gets blown out of that thing and turns into a T-1000. It totally sucks the air out of that. It invalidates that scene because he survives it. It's cool to finally see Arnold as a T-1000, don't get me wrong, but it's just not right for what had happened before that. And now there's talk, even though James Cameron's he's going to be talking about making more Avatar movies for till he dies, I would assume. There's supposedly they started production on him, but we'll see. But he's also a producer on a new Terminator series, which will explain, I guess I've heard, it's all rumor until it actually happens, obviously, but will explain how that character, the T-800, got to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so Arnold is going to be in it. That's kind of a cool idea, I guess. If you want my opinion, which they're not going to listen to, and no one does anyway, you need to go back to the roots of the Terminator. Make it low budget. It's not this splashy sci-fi action movie. You need to give it a modest budget. Like Tim Miller's on board, who did Deadpool for small. Like, keep that in mind. Don't give him $150 million to make this huge spectacle. Like, make it small, make it intimate, focus on the characters, and you could have something gold in there. Will they do it? We'll see. It's probably another 2 years at least. I think they gave it a release date of 2019, so it'll be cool to see what kind of new stuff that they can do. Hopefully they hash new ground and they're not going to be fighting Skynet over and over again, but he says there's going to be 3 movies, but we'll see if that actually happens again. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. I got some cool stuff for October going on, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, though, this show is terminated.
Mr. Brown, let's move too close to Mr. Shit. Are you the police?
No, man. We're musicians. I work for Kaiser Soze.
But this way, no, Romeo!
I work for Kaiser Soze.
But this way, no, Romeo!
Where's the fucking money, shithead?